afternoon. My name is Kevin McCaffrey. I'm the web editor at MM&M Magazine. I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, 12 Healthcare Provider Marketing Ideas You Can Still Implement in 2016. Today, we will be discussing how to shape cross-channel marketing programs, as well as introduce some eye-opening ideas to support your brand. Today's webcast is sponsored by DMD. Our speaker is Roger Corman, president of DMD. Dr. Corman worked for 25 years at IMS Health. During his time there as head of product development, Dr. Corman built the first physician-level prescription database. Roger, thank you for being here. Before I hand over the reins, I'd like to quickly go over a few programming notes. First, I'd like to remind you to submit questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box in the online conference room. We will answer them at the end of the presentation. Second, we'd also invite you to join us on Twitter using the hashtag MMMWebcast. Lastly, if you're encountering any technical problems, please note it in the question chat and someone from our production team will assist you. The slide deck from this presentation will also be available at the end of the presentation. Roger, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everyone, for giving up your time. Although I'm sure everyone is multitasking to some degree, I have some important insights that will allow you to impact your current marketing efforts within the current year. So just a brief overview of what we're going to cover. We'll do a quick reprise of the first session to capture some of the top insights from our first webinar. Then we'll move into the second section, which basically works with your existing content, but modifies how you can leverage it within the channel. Leave the content, take the cannoli, if that reminds you of any particular movie. And then we'll look at the content and within the channel. So that'll be the meat of the presentation sections 2 and 3. And then in the last section, we'll give you a window into our next webinar, into an innovation that is truly revolutionary. And I get to say that having been old enough to observe and to participate in many revolutionary developments within the pharmaceutical marketing scene, within development of innovative data, we have something for you next time that is truly earth-shaking. So with that, let's see where we left off last time in looking at some best practices and how you can impact your effectiveness in the email channel. So first slide I want to come back to is this is a record of 29 companies for whom DMD deployed oncology emails in 2015. And immediately you see this incredible dispersion, this variation between 4% to 34%. And as I mentioned last time, you cannot explain that degree of variation simply by the fact that one company had a new product, another company had a new product, or there was some unusual aspect of the email or the audience. They're pretty much all targeting oncologists and hemoncs. So there's something else working there, and it's a real indicator that some companies are much better at utilizing the email channel, and as opposed to others that are basically stuck where the channel was 10 years ago when email started to become part of the marketing mix. So, you know, with that in mind, if you now begin to wonder, hey, where is my company within any particular therapeutic class? Well, first of all, DMD can tell you where you rank within a therapeutic class in terms of your email effectiveness, but it should provoke the more important question is, how do I move up? How do I make myself better? And even if you're at the top of your class's range, how do I even go on to new heights and effectiveness? So, you know, you wouldn't be here if you didn't understand the value of email. Very, very, very briefly, it is still by far and continues to be the most effective and widely used B2B communication. It is the most widely used app on a mobile phone. It is a content distribution engine more than any other channel, even more than Facebook. More content is shared through the email channel. And when it comes to delivering the goods, delivering an interaction or a sale or a completed registration, email outdistances every other channel. So, you know, no need to belabor the point for those of you who are here today. I also made the point last time, and this is really, I want to keep. I'll come back to this slide again in another context. Think of all the assets that you have. Think of your marketing mix, your brand assets as an ice cream shop. And think of all the different flavors that you've built with your agencies, your digital agencies, your creative agencies, your in-house resources, your partners, and you truly have a plethora of assets. And if that's your ice cream shop and you have the ability to serve that content, and you do serve that content through your field force, through conferences, through CME, through community events, through peer-to-peer, through lunch and learns, these are all the ways that you share those assets. And yet when we now turn to the email channel, what we find is that only a handful of your brand assets are publicized, are outreached to your target universe through the email channel. And that's where there's a big disconnect. DMD conducts workshops for our clients, free workshops, multi-hour workshops. I'm usually the conference, the workshop leader, but some of our other staff do it as well. And I literally do this exercise with brand teams. And I ask them to put up on a poster board, how many brand assets do you have in your promotional armamentarium? And typically it's anywhere between 40 and 60. And it's overwhelming. I can't tell you how every time I'm impressed. And yet, when I ask the question of these brand assets, which of those do you leverage through the email channel, it's actually a handful. And that's really a bigger issue of how content strategy is deployed, how you create an awareness and how you nurture that awareness. It's a huge opportunity to sustain your clients' engagements, your customers' engagements through the email channel. Today, another factoid I went over last time, 75% of all of the content that's deployed through the pharmaceutical promotional email channel is brand attributes. It's product information. And left on the side is all that other good stuff. So, keep that in mind as we go forward. We'll come back to it in another context. The last point that I want to reemphasize is an email database is not a commodity. And it's a shame today that there really has been a precipitous decline, and really an appalling decline in email address quality. It takes a lot to sustain it, and if your vendor is not committed to obtain emails from multiple sources, because not a single email source can cover the diversity of the healthcare universe, physicians, NPs, PAs, nurses. You need multiple sources. You need multiple primary sources, and a primary source meaning where the HCP has volunteered that email address. Anything else is going to be scraped, or it's going to be secondhand. It's going to be off a directory. It's not necessarily going to be the physician's personal email address. Today, what passes for quality is not questioned, and I'm astonished that if a vendor shows up and says, "Hey, we have 90% coverage," well, that seems to be by its own claim a valid claim that the database is a valid database. But you really have to dig further and really understand what makes an authenticated email address. Today, email databases are filled with office addresses. They're filled with the receptionist incoming address. Those can be opened, but they're actually false positives. They actually give you a misreading of your reach to the HCP universe. So you don't want to just accept on the face of it that a database is a database. Okay, this is another great way of looking at the world. Again, in terms of the three classic buckets, operational, tactical, and strategy. When we talk about strategy, we are talking about content, as we just mentioned, using all your brand assets. We're going to focus this webinar heavily around the tactical issues, around the channel, around cadence, time of day, and how emails are deployed, how you target. I call those tactical issues. And the other bulk of the workshop will be on operational issues, on copy and design. So let's see what we can do to help you break out of where you are today and give you action steps that you can execute within the next 12 months. Things that you can do literally within the next 3 months fall into the next section of this presentation. So we're going to cover very, very briefly, stop doing direct mail, targeting the whole practice, sharpening your target list, broadening your target list, using ICD data, diagnosis data to segment your target list. So there's 4 little comments there on targeting. 2, 3, 4, and 5 will really talk about the importance of targeting your email deployments, and then we'll wind up this section, the second section, with the importance of timing deployments. So, it's always risky to bash another channel, but I'm going to propose to you that direct mail is not a sustainable channel today. And if you think about direct mail, it ought to be in the bucket of drive-in movies, doctor house calls, golfing, payphones, typing, Polaroid pictures. You get the picture. Direct mail is not a mainstream channel. And when you think about it, when was the last time you ran over to your mailbox or opened up your mailbox in anticipation of, wow, there's really going to be some great correspondence? Today, in general, what we find is we find our inbox filled up with third-party solicitations, and generally we presume that most of it's junk. And maybe there'll be a personal invite or two, but with that, it's all pretty much stuff that goes directly from our mailbox to our recycling bin. And ask yourself, how many of you out there literally open or go through your mail over your recycling bin? That way you don't have to go through the added step of actually taking it onto your desk. The difficulty, of course, is that direct mail is very sexy. It involves some of the basic creatives of the industry. It's the stuff that gets us excited, the stuff that we think about in terms of the next award, bringing those poster boards up, exciting our clients, showing them to our spouse, showing them to our mother, and getting that winning award for creative. And that's ultimately what gets ported out into many direct mail campaigns. However, when you think about it, there are so many doctor addresses today. Are you really mailing to the preferred mail address? Doctors today are splitting their practices. They're using multiple offices in addition to their home. Do you know if it was opened once? Do you know if it was looked at more than once? No. How much time was spent on that piece? Was it read? Was it considered? No. Do you know when it was opened? And do you know who actually opened it? No, you don't. And in fact, there's virtually no data from the direct mail channel except if there's some kind of BRC return card. And with that, you really are then hard-pressed to understand the ROI on the channel because you can measure the actual responses, but you don't have any handle on the exposure or the value of the exposure. So when you think about it, it's actually a very expensive channel. Oops, sorry about that. In contrast, you have email, which is, it's probably the least sexiest channel. I like to think of email as UPS. If you recall, years ago, UPS had a campaign, and it emphasized the fact that they were ordinary. They called themselves Brown, right? Let Brown do it, or Brown deliver it. Well, today, of course, UPS is the way that most of us get our Amazon packages, and it's by far, the explosive way of supporting the whole digital world. Well, in many respects, email has that same value. It's not glorious. It's not sexy. As a matter of fact, it has to be narrow and simple. In the fourth quarter of 2015, Experian, which is one of the largest database digital email companies in the world, measured a 25% increase in B2B email volume. It's an enormous year-to-year increase in email volume, while at the same time they reported that open rates remain the same. So we continue to see that email is a very, very important channel. It's just not very, very sexy. And we kind of have to look beyond that to its real value. So we have one client who did a true measurement of using direct mail versus using a hybrid campaign. And the campaign was around a Dear Doctor letter, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And they compared their costs with a direct mail only campaign versus going out to as many HCPs as they could reach by email first and then filling in the balance with direct mail. And they found about a threefold difference in cost, which of course always drives me crazy when a client says, email is expensive. Email is expensive compared to what? Because compared to direct mail, it's peanuts. And then they then went the next step, and this is a corporate priority, is to look at the impact on the environment. And they literally computed out the impact of CO2. And a pure direct campaign, direct mail campaign, had 4 times the carbon waste of a mixed campaign, of a hybrid campaign. So whether we look at speed, data, cost, or environmental impact, direct mail is becoming less and less useful. It doesn't mean that it's not useful at all or not valid at all, but you really have to think about its primary applications as opposed to using it as a blanket form of communication. So let's talk about targeting. In the next section, we'll look at targeting. It's probably right now the most neglected and the single biggest area of opportunity. We deploy about 250 campaigns a month, and I could tell you that there's not a single list that we get from one of our clients that does not include dead doctors. And in fact, usually they include not only dead doctors, but semi-retired and retired doctors. Now, there are some companies that actually purposefully promote to retired and semi-retired doctors because they feel that they still have professional associations, professional influence. But there are many companies that simply are not updating their target list, not within 30 days, not even with 90 days, sometimes not within 180 days. And on those target lists are physicians that are simply no longer relevant. Maybe the semi-retired and retired doctors are. I doubt whether the dead doctors are, unless there's somebody knows some cosmic significance in emailing someone who's no longer on the planet. And it's really a shame because that's what it's a small impact, but an important impact on the quality of the entire campaign. So when you think about email, you have to think of it like bread. And as we are saying over and over again, email lists deteriorate like bread. And a list that is 2, 3, 4 days starts to get stale very quickly. Most of the target lists we're getting are actually much, much older than that. And so the most simple thing that you can do is that before you launch any campaign is from your internal database, get the most recent version of your target list. The next consequence of not having sharp target lists and mistargeting is what we see in opt-out rates. And we see this all the time when a client will come back to us and say, wow, I have a big opt-out rate. Well, now keep in mind that opt-out rates are measured as a percent of opens, of your opens, not of your total. So if you see an opt rate of 1% or 2%, it's not out of all the emails you've deployed, but it's out of those emails that have been opened. And what we should see in any given campaign, and I say should see, using normative measures from other industries, including healthcare, you should see an opt-out rate of something under 1%. These are 2 products, 2 brands that we've deployed for. One where we've provided feedback that the targeting is off, and another brand where the targeting is on, and about 30, 40 campaigns there. So there are many data points, and you can see bad targeting versus good targeting. What's the bad targeting? Well, a product, for example, that's obviously intended for adults, and the target list includes pediatricians. So it might be something related to narcotics or pain, and there's the association. Well, let's include pediatricians because they may have use for it. Well, yeah, that may work, but when you see a significant opt-out rate, you have to then immediately ask, have we targeted precisely? So when you think about targeting, there's also opportunities today within your existing list, within your existing mindset, because you're looking at doctors within a particular practice. Most every doctor today is part of a group practice. And what we now are seeing is the use of the digital channel where you wouldn't normally see the use of a rep, because a rep will naturally go in and see, will look for the most targeted doctors. We're now thinking about the doctors that are also in the practice that are easily reachable. How do we know that they're part of the same practice? Well, we have that data. We can link doctors, and as well, we can link NPs and PAs by their practice setting. So when you look at a target, you can now think of a target not just in terms of within a specialty or within the whole domain of physicians. You can think of a target within their common office practice and broaden that target list to the doctors who ought to be relevant because they are participating in the same kind of practice, and as well the other professionals that can be found in that practice setting. That's a quick hit. The other element that you can look at is using diagnosis data, and that often is not used. So you pull your list, and however you get it from your marketing center, maybe you want to ask the question, what other professionals are seeing that same type of case that we haven't previously included in the marketing mix? And it might be physicians, maybe in general practice that you haven't otherwise considered. It might be a good way to refresh your list. So if your disease, if your treatment is targeted at a particular set of interventions, then periodically you want to ask that question, are there other therapeutic professionals that we can easily consider? And again, keep that list as fresh as possible. So targeting for sure is the easiest way that you can make an impact in the next quarter. And the next most obvious way that you can do it, by keeping all of your content the same, and by keeping even your target list the same, is by timing your deployments. And I like to think of timing deployments like commuting, because there are areas, or there are moments of and areas of very, very high congestion, and of course then there are other ways of getting around, of reaching places that are less congested and less frequently used. And so think about, I'm sure we've all commuted into Manhattan and out of Manhattan at one point in our lives. Ask the question, do I really want to drive into Manhattan at 5 o'clock on any given day, or on a Friday for sure? The tunnels are going to be blocked. The bridge is going to be blocked. If you're in Manhattan, and you want to leave Manhattan, you're going to be waiting an hour to get to any one of the access points. And yet, when we look at email, the vast majority of deployments are sent out between Tuesday and Thursday, because that's when most people send deployments. And yet those are the days of the highest congestion. What we get our clients to do is we start looking at other windows. And you can do that by extracting out the physicians on your target list. And what we can tell you is that when are these physicians receiving their emails based on our database of deployed email. Experian, again, in the fourth quarter, released a super great chart. It really, it's worth looking at, and it tells the story on one page. The bars represent the percentage of emails deployed, and the purple graph line above, the percentage of emails that are open. And while the data comes from the general consumer environment, it really confirms what we see in the healthcare environment. And that is that there are opportunities to deploy on the weekends when fewer emails are deployed and where open rates are substantial and higher than on other days of the week. So here in this chart, what we see is on Sunday, and this is again globally for Experian, who's deploying billions of emails. 12% of their emails are deployed on Sunday, but yet 15% of their opens occur on Sunday. Same thing with Monday. 15.6 deployed, a percentage higher open. And then at the end of the week, like Saturday, another opportunity where the percentage opened is higher than the percentage deployed. Where are the toughest days of the week? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And Tuesday, Thursday in particular. And yet what we are often asked to do is deploy emails on Tuesday and Thursday because the client says to us, well, that's when most emails are open. Yes, that's because most emails are deployed. And in fact, actually there are opportunities at other days of the week. That's something that you can implement today. Another way of looking at time deployment is by specialty. And there are vastly different patterns. We've examined many specialties. Some of you have seen this slide if you've seen other DMD presentations. This is the classic case where pediatricians, and Tuesday is their day to open up a lot of emails. Usually Monday they're occupied with all of those kids and snow and events that occur over the weekend, but Tuesday and in particular early in the morning. Whereas of course if you want to draw a contrast, it would be surgeons. And surgeons are out in the operating room in the morning, then they're seeing patients in the afternoon. Typically, they're going to be opening up emails in the evening, and their best day of the week is Thursday. So those patterns are out there, and you can go into your existing email database that you've deployed. If you can look at the opens that you've already successfully generated, and just look at where are the highest periods of usage, of opening, then you can find your own windows, or you can consult with us, and we'll be happy to look at your content and your target list as well, and see if we can point out some areas of opportunity. So those are all of the, I'd say, quick hits that you can do today with better targeting, with really revisiting email versus mail, and with timing your deployments. All of that can be done literally within the next 90 days. The next set of I would say, pointers, it's about the content. You're going to work within the channel, change the content. What we're talking about is very, very small changes of the content. We're actually focusing on 2 or 3 elements of content. So we're really going to look at changing the subject line, or how you work with the subject line, scripting your pre-headers, building a template or a template library, and then finding the easy content that you have within your promotional library to promote through the email channel, finding trigger events, and that really talks to timing, and then finally a word about our consulting services. So let's talk about subject lines. And for those of you who have heard us talk about subject lines, I'll go through this relatively quickly. I would stop talking about subject lines if we consistently saw great subject lines. But unfortunately, as many campaigns as we see, which again is about 3,000 a year, it's a shame that so many subject lines really don't meet the standard. So what should we be thinking about? Well, what you really want to do is, if you're going to spend energy on an email, spend a lot of energy, a lot of creative time just around the subject line. It's the front door to your experience. And like a front door, it's either going to be welcoming or it's going to be foreboding. Today, the subject line is the most important factor in determining whether an email is opened or not. Not the sender anymore. That was good maybe 5 or 10 years ago. But it's the subject line more than any other factor. So do your best thinking. Think about your keywords. Is it patient? Is it efficacy? Whatever that keyword is, you really want to load it in the first part of the email. What we've come to see is it's not necessarily the length of a subject line, it's the importance of the first number of characters that display on your on the mobile device. And of course, today when most emails are opened up on a mobile device, you really have to think about how that subject line displays on a mobile, not on a PC. And you really want to then analyze, and we'll talk about that in a second. So this is a chart. It's an eye chart here on your screen, but you can find it in a ebook that we have published. You can get it off of our website. It's a whole paper just on subject line composition. It's probably the most valuable thing that we've published over the last few years. In it is a chart which will give you the character lengths of every device, and you really want to think about that because today there is a greater display field on devices, but at the same time you really got to make sure you front load your content in the display field. Folks do not want to spend any energy in looking past that display field. Testing, analyze and testing. Do you test subject lines? Yes, we test subject lines. Great, that's super. That's the first thing you should do is generate not just 5 subject lines, generate 15 subject lines. And when you have those subject lines, you can then, first of all, get them through MedLegal, but then you test them. And when you test them, go beyond subject line A versus B. Look beyond the total performance rate of a subject line to your key subgroups. That is not being done today. Folks just look at the global. Well, we did A/B testing, A versus B. But did you look within that amongst the various specialty groups? If you're in diabetes, did you look at the endos and the gastroenterologists versus the IMs and the FMs? You might see differences. You'll likely see differences. And maybe that'll lead you to deploy subject line A for groups 1 and 2 and subject line B for 3 and 4. So when you do that subject line testing, go to the next level and break it down by your important subject groups. I hope everyone knows what a pre-header is. If not, it's the second most important element of an email. It's that text below the subject line. And here's consumer emails, but you can see some pre-headers that work hand in glove. And the pre-header really is 2 hands clapping with the subject line. We don't even consciously process it. I often ask people, well, you know what a pre-header is, and they'll say, no, I really don't. Well, you probably read about 50 of them today. It's that text that you naturally gaze at in your inbox. And you can see subject line, sender fresh direct, Barry, check out your weekly deals, and now comes President Picks, see what's on sale. That subject line, that pre-header extends the thought of the subject line. If you go down a little bit and you see a pre-header that's not scripted, that's just taken off of the email, you get Ideal, Groupon, Michael Kors, and the pre-header is view this email as a web page. I cannot tell you how many emails we deploy where the default pre-header becomes text like that. Click to open up, click to download images. It's really wasted space. So you have to absolutely substantiate what's your subject line and your pre-header. And then we come to the subject of, well, email, it's very difficult, it's very, very expensive. Our design takes so much effort. And to that, you really have to think about building a template library. Many of you have template libraries. Your agencies have template libraries. You can get them from your agency. But really, email is not a rich, creative channel. I hate to dump water on myself, But the beauty of it is its simplicity. It is a thin channel where repeated visual is actually predictable and easier for the consumer to understand the content. So actually you want to use a template, you want to be predictable, you want to make it go fast. It's a very, very fast. You can use your own email templates, you can rent ours, you can get them from many, many, many sources, but creative should not be a new exercise every day. You should have a library of email templates for different content, formulary announcement, sample offer, product information, and go back to them over and over and again. And now we come back to content and think about easy content that you can use to sustain brand awareness, where that creative is not a lot of effort, where the med-legal loops and hoops will not be as tough, and where you get to leverage all that wonderful brand assets that you've created and give your audience a varied diet of content. And it can be anything in your armamentarium, whether it be visit the resource center or patient education materials, the upcoming conference. These are stuff. These are activities or assets which are promoted, but not nearly as well and as great as they should be. Again, 75% of everything that HCPs see in the healthcare email channel from the pharmaceutical industry is product information. And it just sometimes gets boring, open rates decline, and you wind up losing some of your audience. In that regard, there is an opportunity to recapture attention through what's called trigger events. And I'm sure many of you know what a trigger event is. We have a great cartoon from the famous artist Rube Goldberg showing that the walking man kicks, pulls the hook that kicks the boot, that kicks the football, that goes into the basket, so and so and so forth. And if you think about it, that little bit of energy of walking forward is leveraged through every step of the process. And that's what trigger emails are about. They're about leveraging energy that's out there. It can be the events that you've held. It could be your reps visiting physicians, and today most every company has some form of a rep-driven email. For some applications, but with the precipitous decline in reps, with the even then fewer and fewer doctors, something like 47%, not seeing reps or seeing reps on a limited basis, combining digital channel with an event like a visit is absolutely critical. Everyone needs to have a well-developed rep-driven rep-triggered email platform, but then think of all those other events that you are holding that could be followed up with a reinforcing email. So if none of this is sticking, or some of it's sticking, but you want to know a lot more of it, we have our two gurus who have deployed more email programs than anyone in the world. I would say that all more pharmaceutical email programs than in the world. We like to kid around and say Jared makes house calls and Pat gives free advice. In fact, they're both available by conference phone, in person, and if you really want to deepen your understanding of the channel, we have a lot of expertise to share with you. So with that, let me move very, very quickly to the new world that we are anticipating. And if any of you remember the movie Poltergeist, when the little girl goes up to the TV screen and she says, "They're here," and of course that augurs in the whole series of events that follows. Well, I guess it's our way of saying we're here, and we're here in a brave new world of customer identity management, what we'll call audience identity management, where we can actually follow an HCP in the digital environment. And if we can do that, then we'll be able to know who's coming to your website without a registration. If we can actually follow them to your website, you'll know who, and therefore you can compute an ROI on your site. You'll be able to, once you know that they're on your site, serve content in a personalized way. and this is dynamic digital content. This is what's called adaptive customer engagement in some places. You'd then be able to track physicians between sites and actually understand their digital journey, and many people feel that digital journey is the most important aspect of digital behavior. Once they're moving amongst sites, you will then be able to ad serve to them in real time, and of course, more and more media buying and media planning and media buying is moving to programmatic ad serving, and then that will inform planning as a whole and ultimately enable you to measure the channel, the digital channel, in a far more effective way. So it's coming. It's here now. Actually, it's being rolled out, and in our next webinar, we'll tell you a lot more about it. So with that, thank you for your time and attention. We've covered the brief review of some best practices, giving you the ideas of quick hits that you can get to immediately in this quarter. Hold your agencies accountable to, to do better design on subject lines and use of your creative, and then stay tuned for some important developments. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it back to Kevin.
Thank you, Roger, and thank you for that presentation. We're going to go ahead and open up to any questions right now. And looks like we have a first one here. Roger, how can you know an open email has really been opened by a doctor?
Well, you don't. What did he say? That's what he said. He said, well, you don't. I say that somewhat kidding, but somewhat serious. And that is, how do you know an email actually belongs to an HCP? And in order to do that, it does require your understanding of where that email address came from. If it came from what's called a third-party source, a third-party source is a nice way of saying it was scraped. It was obtained through a source that they don't know what the third party was. So it's nice to call it a third party, but it basically means we don't know where that email came from, so we call it a third-party source. So then your supplier can tell you, and you don't know. Now, where your supplier can tell you where it came from, you then have to question, well, does that make sense? Because if you hear, well, we're a publisher and it comes off of our publishing list, yeah, but what's the nature of the publication? I mean, is it premium medical content that physicians are interacting with, or is it an office catalog? Is it a patient care materials? Doctors don't order patient care materials. The office manager does. So if you have an email that's coming off of that kind of a publication, you're probably emailing the office manager, and your open rate is probably driven by office staff, not by HCPs. So you really have to, if you're really serious about utilizing the channel, and I think everyone is, you really want to delve into the pedigree of the source of that email address.
Okay, great. And another question for you here. How many templates do you need in the template library?
Well, that should vary with the amount, the kind of content you have. But to start things off, we generally find that 5 good templates will do just a huge amount of your library. It can cover 80% of your promotion today. Typically, there's one for formulary announcements, one for samples, or for, say, call it ordering stuff. It might be patient education materials. At least one, 1 to 3 variations on product information. So, with those 5 templates, you're really off to the races. As I said, probably your agency does have them. We certainly have many of them. I think the key thing is you want to ask internally, hey, what does our template library look like, and how do we get the most out of it going forward?
Okay, great. And we have another one for you here. Can you explain what a pre-header is?
Well, let's go to where a pre-header isn't. Okay, so where a pre-header doesn't matter. A pre-header does not matter on a desktop or on a laptop. In effect, the subject line is viewable usually almost its entirety, and you don't see a pre-header on a desktop unless your setting is set, unless your view includes both the subject line and the next bit of text. What we generally find is most professionals set their view to single view, and rarely on a laptop or a desktop will you see a pre-header. Where pre-headers are extraordinarily important is on mobile, and that's really very, very, very important. Since today, if an email program does not register at least 50% of its opens on mobile devices, preferably 60% or more, then there's something wrong with either the target list or the deployment itself. So now, in the most important device today, which is mobile, the pre-header is the text that is set under your subject line. So you see subject line, and then you'll see usually subject lines in bold, and then it's the next line, or usually 2 lines of text. Subject lines are anywhere between 30 and 45 characters. Pre-headers are often double that. So you'll have 2 lines of text, which means you actually have triple the number of characters to make your story. And we process them so automatically, then we don't even see it sometimes. But it's the subject line pre-header combination that is the most important factor in generating emails today.
Thanks for that, Roger. And another question for you here. Can you talk more about website ROI?
Well, I can. Not very many people can do anything about it because the vast majority of healthcare websites, of your brand websites, whether they be consumer websites or professional, your corporate sites, do not have a login, do not have a registration, what's commonly called as a gate. Gates, whether it be logons, registrations, commonly become roadblocks. They become obstacles to entering into the content. And as a consequence, virtually no website has a registration up front, or if they do a registration, they'll have some very, very high premier content in the background. As a result, because the visitor cannot be identified, it's very, very, very hard to determine ROI in terms of if we are driving traffic to a site, are the right people coming? If they click through and create an action, download something, order something, yes, but that's going to be in the rare cases. Generally, what we're trying to do is trying to create a digital journey, try to nurture people, to our professional audience, along a learning path. And so the website is a key stop that we want them to come back to over and over again. But we can't. We can't identify who's coming the first time, and we can't identify them on subsequent visits. So it's extraordinarily hard to understand, for all the money that is being poured into websites, what the ROI is. With the new innovation that I'm going to hold off until next time, when my colleague will be presenting it, David Ream, we're going to talk about how we can identify digital traffic, how we can identify a device, how that identification can remain very, very sticky. So it's not like a cookie, it doesn't disappear, how it complies completely with current law and regulation, how it works cross devices, so you can really get a picture of the whole person, whether they're using a tablet, a phone, or a computer. And as a result, therefore, understand who's coming to your site, regardless of the device that they're using, and what they're doing, and match that identity to the activity, and therefore start to compute a true ROI. So that's what's coming down. And if you'd like to hear more about it, ping me or any of our DMD colleagues, and we can give you a preview.
Thanks, Roger. And another question for you here. How do you go about making an appointment with one of your email gurus?
Everyone has, well, not everyone. So we have a great engagement team, and you can just reach out to any of our client, our digital specialists. If you know Stephanie Stokes, Randy Bogard, Frank Dunn, Joe Mastracchio, Carrie Shaver, Lise Hill, Craig Rollbaugh, Anthony Luttenberger, you can give any one of them a shout. You can give any account of our managers a shout. They'll arrange it for you. Or you can just ping us through our website. And our marketing specialist, Lauren Berger, will pick up that request, and then she'll get the wheels in motion.
Excellent. And another question here. Can you link nurses by practice specialty, Roger?
Well, nurses, I guess, is the next frontier, and some interesting things about nurses. So let me take a step back. We have been able to link NPs and PAs. DMD covers about 93% of all MDs and DOs with an email. We cover around 80% of all NPs and PAs with an email, and then we link them by common office practice. And that's basically done through claims data. Now, nurses present a challenge because they're increasingly important, most important in the field of oncology treatment, and increasingly important in other fields, and I'm sure you know which they are, but especially where you have extended outpatient treatment, as in diabetes. And there, we've been able to compile a database of about 1 million registered nurses, and we've been able to identify them in terms of their specialty interests by virtue of the CME that they take, the CME courses. As of yet, we've not been able to link them to practice settings, but we've been able to identify, for example, in oncology, 79,000 nurses who have a specialty interest in oncology. So we can identify them by their areas of study and interest, not yet by practice.
Thanks, Roger. And would you recommend using direct mail with an event-triggered email campaign?
The best of all worlds is when channels are used in sync, and which is really multi-channel marketing. We see it, but often those channels are used parallel. So it's a deployment here, an email campaign there, and they're not linked. But if all of those channels can be centered around an event, so the event is obviously the conference or a speaker program, and you have the follow-up, you have the initial outreach by email, then that's followed by a direct mail, and then any kind of, let's say, email opens then can be followed with very, very targeted direct mail. So you know that you have an audience that is obviously demonstrating some interest, and then therefore your direct mail is targeted, and then vice versa. If you when you get any kinds of responses through direct mail, you can follow that with email. So think of these as a sequence of events, but that work well, but work better when they are pivoting or leveraging off some other promotional event. And that really gets us to to what we call multi-channel marketing of all things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roger. And it looks like we have reached the end of the webcast. Roger, I want to thank you again for your time, and thank you to the audience for tuning in and sending your questions. The webcast will be available on demand at www.mmm-online.com, and the slide deck will also be available for you. Thank you.